Alright guys, so as you guys saw when I was building that fire, I like to start with coals, and especially since, hey, Bogo, thanks for reaching out and sending me those coals. It's just a lot easier to get the fire started, especially when you got other things going on. You don't have to baby it too much. But, as you guys saw, I put about, I think it was like 5 or 6 splits in there, and the bottom I like to go across so they're a little bit elevated above the coals, and then put those pieces on top. So I like to start off with a really, really large fire. Like I said, we're just, even though we have coals in there, we want to have enough to kind of maintain and keep it going. So, build the biggest fires you possibly can. Afterwards, we'll push it closer to the back of the pit so that we can let the draw carry that heat all the way through. So in the beginning, kind of had it closer to the door. I like to do that because it kind of gets a little bit more air up front, so it helps to get the logs burning and all that kind of stuff. And then towards the end, you kind of saw it like kind of toppled everything over. I guess, like you said, I can call that like a dirty fire or whatever, but it's just really a fire that, the way that I like to think about it, again, this is my whatever you want to call it, like I think I said in another video, just kind of like bro science of barbecue. I don't really know exactly what the science of the stuff is, but it just seems to work, where I'm just toppling these logs over just so that we're getting enough heat, but because there's not as much airflow, like clean alleys for all that air to go through, it tends to burn a little bit slower. It seems to maintain a little bit longer than if we would just put 4 logs and we would just like Lincoln log them that way. So that's just my preferred way of doing it. Obviously other people like differently. Some people like putting those 2 base logs parallel to the pit and kind of have those be the things that are keeping that elevated. So we're all basically doing the same thing. It's just the way that I prefer to do it, and even though it's happening right now, I mean, it is just as clean as any other pit, even with the logs being a little bit collapsed. So yeah, it's just a normal fire that's easier to maintain, in my opinion. So let's talk about the stack now. In terms of size of the pit, I think I explained it in my other, backyard pit fire management video. On smaller pits, I don't really play with the damper too much unless I'm like cold smoking, then I might close it down just a little bit more. Really, you don't really have to mess with it. But for pits that are larger, 250s, I feel like you can leave it open, but you can maybe close it down towards the end of the cook. But I would say for like 500s and especially 1,000 gallons, the one that I've got, I tend to close that stack almost halfway. It just seems to, the pull is pretty good on there, and so I don't want it just to, all that heat to rake over the surface and leave. I want to slow it down. So again, that's kind of stuff that you can control by collapsing that fire a little bit in the firebox, reduce that kind of just straight heat that's going all the way through the pit. And you can also kind of change the way the airs, or how much pull that's going on inside the firebox itself, by closing down that stack just a little bit, and it might reduce the fire from going all crazy. You don't want it, you want it to be dancing a little bit, but you don't want your flames to go sideways. I think when they're going sideways like that, it's an indication that your pit is pulling, in my opinion, too fast, or that your wood might be too dry. At the end of the day, there's no specific like amount of wood, no certain amount of coals, no certain type of being half closed, half open, that's going to be exactly the same on every other on any pit. I could probably cook on 10 primitive pits, and even though the temps may read exactly the same, I'm sure inside the pit it's still going to be a little bit different. And it's not a knock on primitive, that would be the same for any pit. And like I said in my other video, I've cooked on at least 10 to 15,000 gallon pits, and they all cook differently, even though they're built by the same people. And the amount of food that you have inside the pit also is going to change how your airflow is going to work as well. Like if it's packed really well and you got briskets and ribs from end to end, it's going to be a little more consistent. Because like right now, because I only got ribs on the back half, it probably is not it's probably changing a little bit, or temps might read a little bit differently up front, because there's really nothing in front to kind of change the way the air is flowing, or that heat is transferring. All right guys, so as you can see in this fire right now, this is what I'm talking about when that draw is too strong, or you probably have too much wood, or even the direction of the wood itself is playing a part. So like this log right here, where it's kind of ramping up like that, I don't usually like doing that. I'll kind of turn it so it has to, at least it goes that way, and then it'll get pulled through. So I'm going to move this one down here, turn this one sideways, and just to kind of reduce that airflow. And when it gets too crazy, when you have this kind of fire, like, you can kind of just play around with it, pull things together again, reduce that airflow. That's the reason why I like cooking this way. So you can see right now, I mean, there are a couple of things that are getting a little bit crazy, but it's not this direct kind of just shooting straight up into that firebox. And that's the kind of fire that we're looking for. We want it to be hot, we want it to be consistent, we want there to be enough alleys for all that air to travel through, but you know, it's about kind of restricting some airflow because we don't want every single piece that we add in there to add another 25 degrees every single time. So I hope that makes sense. You know, I think hopefully even in the time while I was talking, it seemed to calm down just a little bit more. And also, I just don't like stacking my wood up very, very tall, because then now you get your flames that are really tall, and if your draw is really good, then it's gonna kind of suck up that flame. I don't want to say it's gonna basically pull the flames in, but a lot of that top heat, it's gonna just like draw really, really fast. So again, that's another reason why I don't really like Lincoln logging it. I like bunching them together, and you can see it's not super smoky. It's still burning really clean because we allowed there to be enough airflow, but not have too many like big gaps where we have a channel of air going through. Got a lot of coals that are starting to break down right now, and so we're going to be, again, the one thing with this kind of style of burning your firebox is you don't want it to get clogged up with a bunch of coals at the bottom. That's the one thing that could happen, and a lot of people will start throwing on logs and are confused about why it's not burning properly. It's probably because all the coals at the bottom are starting to collect, so we want to make sure we spread them out, we scoop some stuff out if we need to, and then start building on top of that again. That's what the fire looks like right now. The wood, even though it's not as bad as another batch I got, but I'm not still super happy with it. I wish the splits were a little bit bigger. It seems like it's a little more dried out than they said it was, but again, this log right here, it's shooting straight up, so I'm gonna have to turn that one later. As I was building this fire, it looks like I'm just like throwing random logs in there. Kind of looks that way, but you know, I am being strategic about when I'm grabbing logs. Right now, all of my splits are really small, so I can't really play around with it too much. But the thing that I'm trying to do is making sure that I get a mix of some smaller pieces with some pieces that are a little bit thicker, a little bit more, have a little more moisture content, so that you know we can get a good balance of rolling heat and stuff that's going to help those bigger pieces burn. So this one looks a little bit crazy, so we'll have to adjust it a little bit to kind of damper that fire, because I think it is a little bit too crazy at the moment, but yeah, we'll mess around with it in a sec. As crazy as that fire looks, we're doing it right, guys. Yep, can't get in focus, but it says 250. Best believe, stack. Smoke still super clean. The last thing I want to talk about is, again, just kind of, for me, like I said, even though I like the smokier flavor on a smaller pit a little bit better, you know, the 1,000 gallon has its advantages. And there's also ways that you can, you know, like I said, play around with the fire so that you can get that same or closer to that flavor that's a little bit smokier and all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people know that I have a Yoder. I don't think that a Yoder is necessarily a great pit. It's just that I've cooked on that pit a lot, and now I know how to kind of create those flavors that I'm looking for using that pit. And that's a fun part about cooking barbecue and cooking on different pits, and or finding one pit that you're really good with, because then that's when, you know, I guess the term like pit master or whatever, then yeah, you get to master your pit that you're cooking on. Now you can play with other things other than just the amount of smoke and the type of wood, because now you can work with different ingredients, because now you got the fire, you got the smoker, you got all that kind of stuff figured out, and now it's the ingredients, it's the cuts of meat, it's the veggies, all that kind of stuff that you can play around with, because now you're done figuring out how to really use that pit. Hopefully after watching this video you can feel a little bit more confident in the pit that you have. Again, it's not really about, you know, the tool that you got, it's just how you use it. You know, if you got a smaller pit and you got to do a bunch and you just need to get it done, then you just kind of have to do it. And if you got 1,000 gallon and you have a small cook, then whatever, that's cool. At least you're not gonna be short on space. Hope you guys enjoy this video, guys. Make sure you like, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and I'll see you guys in the next one.